Welcome to the Athletes First Performance Podcast. This podcast is focused on providing evidence-based information for human performance and sports medicine professionals. Episode 28 of the Athletes First Performance Podcast. Today, we're breaking down the difference between a rehab and reconditioning approach to working with athletes post-injury. So a rehab approach is often a medical or clinical model for treating athletes that is protocol driven, determined by a physician or surgeon. The focus of rehab is often on the injured body region, determined by wound healing and the early stages of rehab. There is then a gradual progression back into training without any clear gates or criteria to progress back into training. These rehab protocols are often designed to tell the athlete what they cannot do as opposed to what they can do. And these protocols often underestimate the total body healing response that a training approach has on athletes. These rehab protocols are often driven by timelines of biological healing. And just because biological healing occurred does not mean that the athlete is ready and prepared to take on the demands of their sport and competition. On the flip side, we'll talk about reconditioning. Reconditioning is a performance-based model for training athletes following injury or surgery. The reconditioning model still respects tissue healing and maintaining joint health and homeostasis, but focuses on a more athletic model to train the athlete in the presence of injury. The goal of the reconditioning process is to prepare the athlete, not just treat the injury. An injury should never interfere with the opportunity for the athlete to train. And as a sports medicine and human performance professional, we need to find a way to train around the injury while still respecting those tissue healing timelines and post-op precautions. And reconditioning takes an athletic development approach that protects the injury, but always contributes toward reestablishing proper movement patterns and demands that are required for sport. And this takes us into program design and reverse engineering. When we're working with an athlete, we need to be able to determine what the end is in mind and work backward from there. So the program design begins with the end in mind, which is to return the athlete to competition with better physical attributes than what they had prior to injury. And then reverse engineer backwards to that first day that you're working with them. So that might be reverse engineering from peak athletic performance to day one post-op or day one post-injury. So when we're thinking about reverse engineering, the human performance professional, whether it be a physical therapist, athletic trainer, strength conditioning coach, needs to understand the physical demands of the sport and what the athlete needs to be able to achieve to be competitive and reduce the risk of injury moving forward. And when we are reverse engineering the athletic attributes that the injured athlete needs to be able to achieve, we need to develop criteria or gates to make sure that the athlete is hitting all the different check marks that are required for return to sport. And this is developed via a movement hierarchy. So making sure that the athlete has full range of motion, good motor control, full movement quality and coordination, and then building adequate strength, power, and speed, change of direction, and multi-directional speed and agility to fully return back to sport and making sure that we're not returning the athlete back to competition prior to achieving all these physical attributes. So overall, as a sports medicine professional, we need to reframe the way that we're working with athletes. It's not good enough just to be able to get them back to everyday activities and then eventually get them back into a strength conditioning program. We need to be thorough and reverse engineer the criteria that they need to achieve and make sure that they hit all of those criteria prior to returning to competition. This is going to reduce the risk of injury moving forward and improve their athletic performance, quality of their sport, quality of their life moving forward. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on this rehab versus reconditioning model. So go ahead and leave me a comment on Instagram, on podcast, email, or YouTube, and we can further talk about the rehab versus reconditioning model for athletic performance and injury.